Welcome to Alaska Weather, a production of Alaska Public Media and the National Weather Service, Alaska Region. Produced and broadcast daily from the studios of KAKM, Alaska Weather provides complete forecasts, public, marine, and aviation for all of Alaska. Alaska Weather is made possible by the following sponsors.
The National Weather Service.
Good evening, everybody. I'm Mary O'Connor. On behalf of the Alaskan Aviation Safety Foundation and the National Institute for Occupational Safety and Health here in Anchorage, thank you for joining us on Hangar Flying. We are happy to have Melanie Blado back on the program. She's going to share some enthusiasm and some excitement about being a new pilot. Melanie, welcome back.
Thank you. It's good to be here.
We know that you had some very condensed time for your flight training, and you made it a point to get up several times a week. You had some unplanned weather during one of your flights. What happened?
I did. As many pilots know, in the winter we have a tendency in Anchorage towards ice fog and temperature inversions that are associated with that. And so I think I had 4 days in a row that I couldn't fly. And on my 5th day, finally, it was VFR again and I could get out. So I took off, and there was a fog bank low over the inlet, but it kind of had been coming in and out for several days. And so I saw it out there as I was flying, and I thought, oh, it's probably okay. And I just went out to the practice area across by Point McKenzie to practice some maneuvers when air traffic control came on the radio and told me that Merrill had just gone IFR. So I knew I had 4 hours of fuel on board. I'd already completed all my cross-country training, so I knew I could, if necessary, fly all the way to Homer or even Fairbanks, I suppose, without a problem. So I decided to wait about a half an hour, and it was suggested that I think about landing at Birchwood, but about 5 minutes later, Birchwood went IFR. So I came up with an alternate plan, which was to land out at Wasilla. And so after about probably an hour of flying and realizing that the weather wasn't going to clear, I went ahead and I landed out in Wasilla. And one of the things I learned was the importance of having an alternate plan. So I'd already discussed that with my instructor, what I would do if Merrill was closed for some reason, what were the other alternate airports I could land at. I'd already done practice landings at International, at Birchwood, at Palmer, and at Wasilla, which were all nearby airports. So I just chose the one closest that I was familiar with and that I knew had a plowed runway, since I had never landed on gravel and I hadn't done my soft field training either. So that's what I did. And I think of all my training, it was probably the day I thought I would do the most work on my maneuvers, but actually got to do the most work on sort of aeronautical decision making and contingency planning and the importance of being flexible while in the air and also safe.
That's great. I think that it's nice to have that while you're still a student pilot and still have some avenues of assistance that you're not ashamed or embarrassed to ask help with. Like air traffic control was very helpful?
Yes, they were. I was really appreciative of how helpful they were. They got me runway conditions. They went to get me runway conditions at Birchwood. They gave me conditions everywhere. They gave me the weather at Wasilla. And while I was struggling with my big paper chart trying to figure out where I was, they gave me vectors to get me right to the airport. So that was really, really helpful, and I really appreciate it. And I just like to say that I found air traffic control to be really helpful in my training and flight services as well, and my cross countries. Both in Kenai and in Homer, and also all the air traffic controllers at Merrill who were very kind and patient while I was learning how to use the radio and the appropriate radio calls and what everything meant. So I just certainly appreciate their work.
Oh, good. So the relative recency that you've gotten your license hasn't allowed you to take a passenger up yet, has it?
It has not. Since I got my license, which was on the 10th, last Monday, in January, I've had weeks of fog and or snow, which is fine because I'm also a skier. So when I can't fly, I can always ski.
And who are you going to take up?
I'm trying to take up my dad. That's who I want to take up first. So we're just organizing schedules and waiting for weather so that I can take him up.
And do you have plans to stay current, seeing how weather is challenging? Time is also a challenge when life gets in the way and people don't get to fly as much as they'd like. What are you going to do to stay current?
So what I'm going to do is I'm looking to buy into either a share of an airplane or a flying club right now. And until then, my plan is to rent about once a week for an hour or so just to keep my skills fresh. I consider getting my license a big investment of both my time and money. And I think it's worth either, about once a week trying to go out for at least an hour or so and practice maneuvers, landings, all of that. And hopefully take up some of my friends and family with me as well.
Very good. Any advice for new pilots?
I would say two things. One, don't be afraid. It's intimidating at first. There's a lot of jargon. There's a lot of systems that you have to learn. It's really fun. You'll feel really free and you'll really enjoy the challenge. And the second thing I would say to new pilots is I found the aviation community to be very welcoming. So don't be intimidated and reach out. And everyone I talked to who was a pilot and I said I was new was helpful. I had friends who, when they found out, took me flying or offered to take me flying and just spent time talking with me about airplanes and aviation. So I just say there's no reason to be intimidated. So just, get out there and try it.
Well, welcome to the club.
Thank you.
And congratulations very much on your license. I hope you have a lot of years of happy flying.
I think I will.
Thanks, Melanie. Ladies and gentlemen, we hope you've enjoyed our show today, and we hope that you may take an interest in learning to fly as well. Until next time, be safe.
Hello again, everyone, and thanks for joining us and staying tuned for this Friday's edition of Alaska Weather. Up first, satellite imagery showing clouds here sliding northwestward across the Alaska Peninsula, bringing a little bit of moisture with it there, but nothing heavy at all, kind of scattered and intermittent. And an old boundary right through here, as you can see, getting pushed back to the west there north of the central Aleutians. And then today, that whole mess, actually that was yesterday's sequence we're looking at. Now that whole mess sliding northward out there as another little bit stronger system pressed its way in and frontal passage right around Shimia this afternoon with rain, southeast winds gusting 40 to maybe 50 miles an hour. So we got gales all through this area, much lighter winds back to the west. And again, still some clouds and a few areas of light precipitation from the Alaska Peninsula on up to the Pribilofs, and then breaking out here, Kodiak Island, Bristol Bay, northward into the interior. Some areas of clouds up here, but actually this is just the warmer conditions south of the Alaska Range. And then some high stuff up here around Arctic Village that's drifting off into Canada. Big area of upper level high pressure, again, right over the interior. And all that's going on, just some scattered clouds there in the western Arctic coast, and still windy here over the southeast coast, but not quite as windy. The high wind warning's gone, not even any wind advisories out, but still pretty gusty on the winds there, gusting upwards of 50 miles an hour in the channeled areas. And temperatures on the chilly side, and of course dry conditions, lots of sunshine down there across southern Alaska, Prince William Sound. High pressure, a broad area, quite strong pressures around 1,040 millibars near the centers, and really not much different either side of that, dropping south of the Alaska Range here, but really not much of a gradient at all. So we had light winds Kodiak Island, even the Arctic coast, winds pretty light. The gradient now up there mostly shifted off to the north, and not even any flurries going on anywhere there. The only precipitation, and again quite light and intermittent in the Alaska Peninsula, Cold Bay, maybe False Pass over to about eastern Aleutians, had some, or Dutch Harbor on Alaska carried some observations of light rain, kind of a mixed light rain and snow condition there for the Pribilofs, and that's about it, except got more wind out here over the Bering Sea and the Aleutians again, especially ahead of the front here. Gusts 50 miles an hour with the gale force winds out in that area. And for tonight, that really doesn't change too much here. It tries to push eastward there. Another center down off the chart there, and southeast winds. Now we've got good gales holding over the AKwx area and picking up some a little bit here for the eastern Aleutians and become a little more southeasterly there for the Alaska Peninsula. But definitely nothing strong. Light winds across eastern Bering Sea to St. Lawrence Island. Light variable winds over much of interior Alaska tonight with that high center, especially over the Seward Peninsula. No wind there. Mostly clear skies, maybe a few clouds up over the Chukchi Sea. And that also along the Arctic coast, quite light winds there, and should lose the clouds from the Brooks Range southward all the way to the Gulf of Alaska here. Looks pretty good, and not much change here for the southeast coast. Evening and night looking pretty much like the daytime. High pressure to the north, so gale force winds through Lynn Canal, and also some gale force winds out along the coast as well, with the tighter pressure field there, with the difference between the high here and the low down south of the Queen Charlottes. And then tomorrow that low slips down to the southeast a little bit there, so that'll keep this frontal system to the south. So really no moisture will be reaching even Dixon Entrance tomorrow from that. Just some lower clouds there hung up on the northern sides there of the mountains, mostly north of the pass. Probably not getting down where I have it here into the Haines area. That'll probably all stay north of Skagway from there northward. And otherwise, still breezy, but not all that strong. Definitely looking at some gales for Lynn Canal again, but not blasting through into the Juneau area or even through Lynn Canal like it's been known to with the same pattern here with the high pressure aloft. Northeast winds, enough to keep it windy over the Panhandle, but nothing too terribly strong. High pressure, light winds south of Kodiak Island. Another fair day, dry conditions, no snow anywhere from the Arctic coast out to the Nunivak Island area, just mostly clear conditions. And then you start picking up the winds again, same pattern here, southeast flow, getting some moisture caught up in it for a chance of some light rain or drizzle, maybe some patchy fog for the Alaska Peninsula. And again, the Pribilofs, the more stormy conditions now out over the western Aleutians of that next low center, drifting northward here at about 973 millibars. So we're looking at wind gusts 40 to 50, maybe 55 miles an hour, gale force winds again, mostly around the central Aleutians here from the east and east-southeast. And still light winds over the northern Bering Sea and the strait up into the Chukchi Sea, but that starts to pick up on Sunday a little bit and become more north and northeasterly up here. And that weather symbol should not be there. It's going to be fair conditions, dry, maybe some noticeable light snow showing up on the western Arctic coast there from about Wainwright, maybe down to Cape Lisburne, possibly Point Hope, but that's pretty light there. But a little more maybe continuous than what we've lately seen. Same thing going on the east side there, but nothing significant with the high pressure aloft holding. Really no change through the weekend, no big changes, maybe just some passing variable clouds in the interior areas. Otherwise, got a low developing in the Gulf of Alaska here, and by Sunday afternoon it may be developed enough that we're seeing general increase in the clouds across this area, with maybe a few light showers showing up that will stay off the coast. Otherwise, Prince William Sound should be a VFR day, meaning mostly clear, right into the Cop River Basin. Some of this cloudiness may start showing up along the north coast of the Panhandle. Elfin Cove could see a pickup in the clouds, maybe Sitka, but generally it'll definitely be dry. There'll be no precipitation across the entire Panhandle on Sunday, and it should be mostly sunny, especially down to the southern areas. One change is the winds will be lighter on Sunday than what they'll be tomorrow. Otherwise, out to the west, that front hung up here over the central Aleutians. That'll keep the gale force winds in for that area. And then back to the east, except as the front presses northward, those winds will diminish in the afternoon from about Amchitka out to the west, but kind of a narrower band now of precipitation, again, right over Adak and Atka, and that's definitely will be the wettest place in the state on Sunday, and even those rainfall amounts won't be very much at all. Kind of breezy here for the Pribilofs up to St. Matthew Island. Lighter winds though down along the coast, and light variable winds shaping up for or continuing Cook Inlet and Prince William Sound. A little bit more of a northwest breeze, say through the Barren Islands, but nothing more than 20 or 25 knots, and even lighter Kodiak there. Mostly clear skies again. Low pressure developing here, Gulf of Alaska. Really hard to tell how much cloudiness may find its way back to the west there into Fognak Island or possibly down to the Chiniak Marmot Bays, but that's about all that's going on. Otherwise, really kind of a calm weather pattern for the middle part or the early part of February. Temperatures this afternoon, all in the 30s here across the southeast coast. These were 4 o'clock readings. 30 degrees at Klawock, 32 down at Annette, up to 37 for Sitka. Same thing in Skagway as well as Yakutat. And then Prince William Sound, depending on where the wind was blowing, with the high freezing levels, warm air aloft, Valdez pushing up to near 50 degrees with that downsloping northeast wind going. Otherwise, Gulkana at 13 and Cordova 36 with Portage at 32. And then Seward right at 30 with freezing temperature even there at Homer, 23 in Kenai. Upper teens to lower 20s. Madanuska is sitting in the valley this afternoon with 18 at Palmer, one of the cooler areas, and 21 at Talkeetna. Gunsight there, a little higher elevation, 31 degrees. Otherwise down to close to or a little above zero for the Tanana Valley with Fairbanks at 1. That same temperature matched at Northway. And then Denali up to 21. Otherwise, farther north, 5 above for Fort Yukon, but Bettles and Tanana staying below zero, or were below zero at observation time at 4 o'clock with -3 and 4 below. Otherwise, Arctic Village at 5, 7 at Anatuvik, 3 there at Umiat Airfield. Teens along the Arctic coast, actually a pretty good cool down from yesterday. Umiat yesterday was about 24 or 5 degrees, something like that. So a lot cooler than yesterday, but Cape Lisburn still up to 27 with 14 over at Dead Horse. Kivalina, 6 degrees above zero, 8 degrees at Selawik, 11 Kotzebue, Shishmaref 9 above. Milder though down on the south side of the peninsula, Koyuk at 27 and Nome 12 above. And inland here, single numbers with 2 degrees reported at McGrath, warming to about 6 there at Bethel, but Mountain Village 18 above and 21 up Monik, 15 Macoriac, mid-20s, St. Lawrence Island, Savunga, and then south in the Bering Sea we go to the upper 30s for St. Paul, and milder here in the Aleutians, lower 40s there with that southeast wind ahead of the front, near 40 for Nikolsky, on 40, right on the mark there for Unalaska. Out toward Shimia, 38 degrees, wind and rain there. And upper 30s for the Alaska Peninsula with Sand Point, 39 degrees. That was the warmer location there. And Kodiak up to 40. Otherwise, we saw 24 at King Salmon, 17 Iliamna. Lows tonight, below zero, could be down to 20, maybe 22 below there over the Yukon Flats, maybe -15, Northway Tok in those locations. A shade below zero there for the Copper River Basin. South Central Alaska, temperatures down to 5 above in the chillier areas. Otherwise, teens, places like Butte might drop down below zero, as well as the greater Willow area could drop below zero. Otherwise, upper 20s, Kodiak Island, teens and 20s for the Panhandle. And then we've got below zero, the 0 degree isotherm pulled all the way out to the southwest coast there, which includes Bethel. But Macoriac on the plus side of zero with 12, 34 for St. Paul, 30s for the Aleutians. Highs for tomorrow, back above zero over much of the interior. Single numbers though, although Northway -1. Yukon Flats, some areas staying below zero, but not too bad. Milder conditions to the west here with 20s again for Bristol Bay, near 40 for the Alaska Peninsula, all the way out to Shimia. And it looks like upper 20s, 2 upper 30s here, much like today there for the southeast coast. And for flying weather, we've got good VFR in the forecast tomorrow morning here for the southeast coast, Gulf of Alaska, all in the interior under high pressure. Even the Arctic coast, marginal VFR off the coastline to the north. And this stuff here looks like it'll be out to the west, so Nunivak Island might see some marginal stuff tomorrow morning, and the Pribilofs more likely. IFR here for the central Aleutians. And then moving to tomorrow afternoon, say this chart for around 3 p.m., we've got some marginal VFR slipping on into the central Arctic coast and the North Slope areas. No change, good flying conditions here through all of interior Alaska, Gulf of Alaska, and this pulling back even west of Nunivak Island, St. Lawrence Island, VFR for the Alaska Peninsula, areas of marginal VFR here as you head west and southwest, and pretty likely seeing some IFR there with the front stalled out over Adak and Atka to about Amchitka, and then improving a little bit back to the west. So passes just like yesterday, all VFR in the forecast for the Brooks Range and the Western Alaska Range, Lake Clark and Merrill, VFR, rainy, also VFR, windy VFR, and again, ceilings visibility is unlimited for many of the passes, if not all of them. Tanita, that's the forecast, Portage VFR, Chilkoot and White open. And for the freezing levels, again, strong upper level ridge right over the interior. And this is reflected by these 6,000 foot freezing levels here associated with it. If it was summertime, the same pattern, we'd be scorching 80s and 90s in the interior. But like if it was June or July. Anyway, surface up to the Gulf of Alaska and then down just along the Panhandle. Icing none over the interior or the Panhandle. Areas of light to very isolated moderate of the rime type icing here, slipping eastward, possibly to the Nikolsky area. I think on Alaska off to the west, you'll be icing free. And then best chance to be here over the central Aleutians, but that threat extends on out to Shimia. And the upper level wind flow chart again as today and tomorrow and probably Sunday as well. High pressure right over the interior, kind of oscillating around though, but the main jet at 33,000 feet well off to the west. Although from the northeast coming right across the southeast coast here, and then we've got southeasterlies at about 70 knots heading up to the Russian Far East. So that front is going to stay roughly in this position through the weekend, gradually weaken. 9,000 foot wind flow chart looking like this. Northeasterlies 15 to 25 here for the Panhandle, much lighter, 0 to 5 knots or even 10 knots over the all of interior Alaska right up to the Arctic coast. Really light winds, Kodiak Island, northern Bering Sea. Windier though out over the Aleutians, 35 knots there, about 30 for the Pribilofs, and then 40 to 50 knotters for the central Aleutians, diminishing towards Shimia. 3,000 feet, 60 knots there, that right in advance of that frontals boundary, and 35 to 45 elsewhere here to the eastern Aleutians. And again, light variable winds under high pressure over all of the interior. Northeast, 3,000 feet, north-northeast, 30 to 40 knots blowing across the Panhandle. Excuse me. And with that will go some moderate chop, mechanical turbulence here with those cross-barrier winds right from probably, say, Sitka down into Dixon Entrance, and probably less of that up to the north. Smooth for the interior, and then a band of moderate turbulence possible from Kiska Island eastward to maybe Nikolsky. Onto the icing. There we go, hit the right button. Next one, ice edge today, looking something like this. And those thinner areas have shown up due to the southerly winds here along the coast and also north side of the Seward Peninsula and possibly St. Lawrence Island. With the winds kind of reversing direction after tomorrow, those should start filling back in pretty rapidly, and we'll see a gradual extension southward of the ice edge over the next, or into the first of next week. Marine forecast, gales on the south coast, small craft advisories on the north side, still some higher gusts, a gale warning for Lynn Canal for one more day. And then for Sunday, 30 knots there, 20 knots northerlies down the coast, 20 to 30 on the south coast from the northeast, much lighter now up north. Prince William Sound, light winds tomorrow as well as for Cook Inlet, northwesterlies 15 to 20. Barren Islands, Kamishak Bay, light westerlies for Kodiak and light winds for the North Gulf Coast. Sunday, light variable winds, Prince William Sound, Cook Inlet, even the North Gulf Coast, more of a west-northwest wind, but only 10 to 15 for the Barren Islands and Kodiak. Alaska Peninsula, northeast 15, Bristol Bay, northeast 15, east-southeast 20 for the Alaska Peninsula. And then Sunday, not a lot of change, east-southeast to 20 knots again, and northeast for Bristol Bay, northwest now, Sitkinak to Castle Cape. And 30 to 35 knot winds for the eastern Aleutians, definitely a more gale force wind of 40 to 45 knots for the central Aleutians, diminishing back to the west. And then on Sunday, still looking at gales there, front stalled out, 35 to 40 knots east-southeast, all the way over to about Nikolsky, then small craft advisories for Alaska Island. Southwest coast, east 15 knots, pretty light tomorrow, St. Lawrence Island, small craft advisories, St. Matthew Island, down across the Pribilofs. Sunday, no change really for those zones, and north to northeast at about 20 here in Nunivak Island to St. Lawrence Island. And for the Arctic coast, on the eastern Beaufort Sea coast, we're looking west tomorrow, 15 knots, southwest 10, pretty light winds all the way down across the Chukchi to the Bering Strait. And then for Sunday, wind direction shifts around a little bit, north to northwest, 15 knots from Wales up to Cape Beaufort. And then northerlies become northeast on the central coast, but only at about 10 knots, and then a little more easterly over toward Demarcation Point. And for tonight, again, high pressure aloft and pretty high pressures at the surface, although they're gradually weakening, sort of sliding off to the east there with a more general center now down south of Kodiak Island. Stays rather windy here across the Panhandle, but no wind warnings out there, just gale warnings for the marine areas. And then this windy condition, again, gusts 50 miles an hour, periods of rain for the central Aleutians, less of that for the eastern Aleutians and Alaska Peninsula. And for Saturday, tomorrow, no change from today to speak of, really, and still windy and wet, gale force winds out in the Aleutians. And winds for the Panhandle gradually coming down, and even lighter conditions on Sunday. That may allow a few more clouds to start showing up over the Gulf of Alaska here due to this developing weak area low pressure, but these showers will stay off the coast. No change in the interior, mostly clear, variable clouds passing around from time to time. Maybe a few flurries on the Arctic coast, especially on the west side here, and that front stuck in the central Aleutians. That'll keep the gales out there along with the precipitation. Let's look at the Alaska weather for this evening. Thanks for joining us.
These forecasts are to be used for planning purposes only. Call 1-800-WX-BRIEF for a formal pre-flight briefing. Always file a flight plan before you go flying. The U.S. Coast Guard Auxiliary urges you to leave a float plan with a friend or the harbor master before you go boating. Alaska Weather is made possible by the following sponsors.
The National Weather Service.
If you're interested in serving on your local Federal Subsistence Regional Advisory Council, the deadline to apply is Friday, February 3rd. Call 1-800-478-1456 for more information.